about now?
It was entirely my fault. An alarm went off on my phone, and when I dismissed it, I hit a volume setting, and my phone was like, "Oh, you don't want to hear anything anymore ever again? Cool. You won't."
Well, now we're a Sprint commercial. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now?
Apparently, though, like that it had some kind of effect that people couldn't hear me. I don't know, but we're good. We're good. We got 500 likes already. This is exciting.
I'm so excited. Would you like to introduce yourself for the people on my side who maybe don't know you?
Absolutely. Hi, I'm Rabbi Noyo, as my handle suggests. I'm a rabbi, and most people call me Rabbi Noyo. It's the first 4 letters of my last name. I'm Rabbi Sarah Noyo, but everyone calls me Rabbi Noyo because I am not Rabbi Sarah. My pronouns are she and they. You can refer to me with either she or they pronouns. I'm currently the campus rabbi at Syracuse University. So I'm working with the Hillel International Syracuse chapter with students on campus. And yeah, your turn for my peeps.
Amazing. Before I do that, I have to tell you, my husband is from upstate New York. He's from like Watkins Glen. I don't know if you know where that is, but it's up in that area. He's from a town that is most famous. It's famous for 2 things. One, it has some I don't know, some NASCAR track. I don't know, but we don't visit in the summer because it's overrun. But the other thing it's famous for is a beautiful gorge that looks like something out of like a Lord of the Rings book. It's like stairs carved into the side of the mountain. It's gorgeous and I love it. It's up in the Finger Lakes area. Do you know where?
I moved to Syracuse in July. I've never worked before. I'm currently in Boston for my winter break because this is where my partner lives. He's upstairs recording a podcast and I'm downstairs on TikTok Live. So
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, for the benefit of your followers, my name is Abby. I'm a non-denominational pastor. I have a church plant. I had a church plant. We are not meeting anymore, but I am from a non-denominational tradition, which means that we're not high church liturgical. We're a little bit more loosey-goosey in our theology. Well, to be determined, but I am what most people would consider an evangelical, even though I don't consider myself an evangelical. And in our church, what we like to say is that we are evangelical Christians. There's not really a label for it yet for people who relate to the contemporary music and leadership of non-denominational churches, but don't resonate with a lot of what evangelicalism has become synonymous with.
Right. Yeah.
And my hair is normally not this big, but it is raining here today. And so I'm like,
I love you joined and I immediately thought, man, I wish my hair looked like that today. I showered yesterday, so this is like my second day. It's a little less frizzy because it's a little greasier. You know, if it falls flat. Did I shower? No, I showered today. I lied. I showered today.
Hey, good for you.
Yeah. You know, sometimes that's what hair is meant to be seen. Unless you like to cover, in which case it is.
I was going to say, well, what a perfect opportunity to dive right in, because I used to work in a context that was predominantly Orthodox Jewish people. And one of the things that I learned was that that's not always true for everyone. For many people who are part of the Jewish faith, they actually don't want their hair to be seen. Yeah. I would love for you to tell me about that. I was very young then, and I didn't know how to ask questions out of genuine desire to know, without it coming across some kind of way, or I was afraid that it would come across some kind of way. I have a feeling now, looking back on it, that had I just asked, they would have been more than willing to talk about it with me.
Yeah. I mean, also there's, you know, as you get older and you learn more about the way your phrasing works and what kinds of ways to ask that are appropriate and less appropriate. Yes. So, but I'm happy to answer your questions about covering hair.
I have so many good questions to ask you. I just want you to know that.
Yeah. So yeah, there is a custom, a tradition within Judaism, according to Jewish law, using gender binary, women, when they get married, in the binary and, heteronormative world, to a man, the woman covers her hair, which can look different in different communities by way of interpretation. So a few examples. There are people like, if you know That Gingy Jew, the creators, Moses and Zipporah on TikTok. They are an Orthodox couple, and Zipporah covers her hair. She either wears a scarf. I mean, you can sometimes see like a little bit of her hairline, and sometimes she wears a gorgeous wig, which looks very real. And actually, one of my mutuals, Amalia, recently made a TikTok being like, it's hard. It's hard to be Jewish and to suspend your belief when you're watching TV, because if you're Jewish, because like, what a good wig looks like, and you can tell what is a wig and what is a bad wig when they do like flashbacks of characters.
Yes.
And she made a point of like, if I need a wig, like, I'm talking to Sabora, because like she does good wigs.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So Zipporah is one example of people who cover their hair. There are some communities that do not actually allow wigs. They must be covered with scarves, because wigs today are so good, or can be so good. They look like real hair, and they look just as sexy as real hair, or even sexier than your real hair. And that defeats the purpose of covering the hair, which is supposed to fulfill one of the modesty laws.
Yeah. That's interesting. I had not thought about that.
Nobody else should be like aroused by your hair or your elbows or your collarbone or all the other things that women who fulfill these modesty laws will be covering. So there are some communities that do not allow the wig. The wig in Yiddish is called a sheitel. That's Sheitel. That's how I would spell it, a sheitel. So some places just allow scarves. And there, of course, are like loads of different scarf styles. I know Tichel Gal is on our feed right now in our comments, who does wear scarves, and has some videos on wrapping. There are some other really great creators that you could find in my list of people I follow of people who have really fun and beautiful scarf wrapping tutorials. And if you are one of those people and you're watching right now, like, say, hi, I'm one of those people. Follow me for scarf videos. Sephardic party with the Sephardi says Sephardic communities tend to use tichels, which are the scarves, over wigs.
Okay.
And then another example of head covering is what we like to call headband nation, which is not really
I'm so sorry for my face. The women that I'm familiar with from my place of employment previously, they all wore headbands.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah. So it's kind of fondly called headband nation. A lot of people that I went to rabbinical school with, when they got married, started wearing headbands. It's just something in their hair. It's actually kind of akin to wearing a kippah, which is, it's a head covering rather than covering. So there are folks who will wear a hat or a headband or a scarf or whatever, or a kippah or whatever it is, that when they go out in public, they are wearing something on their head, because this is something that they started to do when they got married. But it's not necessarily about, I can't let anybody see the hair. Although sometimes they might wear scarves, because scarves can look really pretty.
Would you say that that's like a symbolic way to adhere to the law, like a symbolism, like a symbolic submission to law, where it's not necessarily something they feel convicted to adhere to strictly?
I would say for some people it might be considered symbolic, but I think for some people it is a way of following the law. of covering the hair, but it's not about making sure that none of the hair is visible. It's about putting something over the hair. I wear a head covering. I'm not married. My head covering is my kippah, and I don't wear it for modesty reasons. I did see somebody asked about men wearing head coverings, and there is not a law that men must cover their hair when they're married or before they're married. There is the custom of wearing a kippah, and or a hat. Sometimes a hat over a kippah, depending on what their tradition is. But that is not related to the modesty laws. That's just related to the traditions of head coverings. I don't wear a kippah for that reason either. I actually wear mine to be a visible Jew in public. I generally don't wear it when I'm just like around the house. I only put it on, like, I didn't have my kippah on earlier today, but then I had to run to the grocery store to get hamburger buns for dinner. And so I put it on, and it's been on for the rest of the evening.
May I ask you a question about it?
Yeah.
Because you are the first not male person that I have seen wear one. I think that growing up, I was under the impression that it was strictly for men.
Yeah.
Is that incorrect? Or are you trying to move in opposition of what you feel like is something? Because I think there are things within Christianity where women have traditionally been held back from it. And now a lot of women are like, no, I'm going to do this thing to forge a way forward for what I feel like should be something that's meant for everyone.
All of the above. Like, as Techel Gal said, also conservative women will wear kippot. Any gender can wear a kippah. But again, just like I was saying before about how in different communities, like, wigs are allowed versus others, wigs are not allowed. Like, in some communities, women wearing a kippah is just like inappropriate. It's seen as wearing men's clothing, which is in fact a law that you're not, like, you should not wear. Like, don't be wearing, it's called don't wear men's clothing. Like, that's the law. Or don't wear women's clothing, because of course it's
right,
cis heteronormative. But there are lots.
We're going to put a pin in that.
There are a lot of communities where any gender wears kippah. Any gender can wear the boxes, the leather boxes. Those are called tefillin. In English, they're called phylacteries, which tells you nothing more than tefillin. Who came up with that English word, I don't know. People wear the fringes, the tzitzit. But in historically traditional communities, such as the one that Jinji Jew, Moses and Zipporah belonged to, Zipporah would never wear a kippah and would never wear tzitzit and would never wear the boxes. Those would be only things that Moses would wear, because in their community, it is those are men's garb. But in my community, it's as common as wearing pants. And then you've got other Orthodox Jews like that. The real Melinda Strauss, who is Orthodox, doesn't cover her hair, does wear pants, would probably not wear a kippah. I would be surprised that she'd wear a kippah. So, like, one of my favorite things to say is nothing is a monolith. Judaism is not. Orthodox Judaism is not a monolith. Progressive Judaism is not a monolith. Yeah.
It's funny because I think like the flavor of Christianity that I grew up in, you were never supposed to wear a hat in church. It was considered disrespectful. The same way that you like remove a hat during the national anthem or you would take your, but there are a lot of churches where hats are considered a really big part of your church attire, because it shows that you are going above and beyond. And we're not talking about baseball caps, we're talking about church lady hats.
Oh yeah.
And
like talking about,
so no community is one thing. Like every faith structure has different community spaces where things look different. And one of the things that I think is important for Christians who need to deconstruct some things is to understand exactly what you're saying, which is that we as Christians have always lived on a very strict binary, what is or isn't appropriate. And we don't have a lot of grace for that, even within our own faith contexts, let alone other faith contexts. And so I think one of the most important things for Christians who are looking to deconstruct, and why it's so important to include voices from other religions in your journey, is because it helps you understand that there are people who express their faith differently, and it does not make that faith any less valid, even if it's the same faith or a different faith. And I think that's one of the things I've always very much respected about all of my experiences within Judaism, is that there is so much grace for some of the ways that things are expressed differently. And I really wish Christians knew how to do that.
Yeah.
Obviously nothing's perfect. Like, no,
Yeah. I also want to say, I misread the question about men and head coverings. The question was actually, would men be allowed to cover their hair? And I answered it as, are men supposed to cover their hair? And to answer, are men allowed, in the same way that in my communities, any gender can wear a kippah, any gender can wear techel or sheitel, like men or non-binary, anybody can cover their hair. So like, I mean, I have a, you might know Joshua Maria Garcia, who's a really wonderful creator.
He and I just became mutuals like yesterday.
Yeah. We were in rabbinical school together for like a couple of years. We overlapped. He didn't end up finishing like going down the path as a rabbi. He's got lots of TikToks on his personal religious journey. I don't want to like tell his story for him, but
he's truly lovely though.
He's an amazing person. And he has like often worn scarves and looks amazing in them. I kind of want to wear scarves, like, but I feel like it's in the same way as like, I don't wear makeup because it's a lot of work for me. And then I have to wash it off, and that's also a lot of work for me. And I feel like
the path of least resistance. I'm for it.
I feel like I love the look of a tichel. I like, with like a braid across here and like a nice voluminous bump back here. Like, I love that look. I've asked my partner, what do you think if I wear this? And he'd be like, I like your hair, but like, you can do whatever you want. And I'm like, I probably won't. I'm just dreaming.
I love that.
It'll be forever to learn how to do it. Yeah, hair in a ponytail would save a lot of work when putting on a scarf.
Rev DHJD says, in many African American churches, hats are a covering to literally comply with the requirement that women cover their heads, because it is stated in the New Testament as well. And so, and that's a debate that rages. I've never personally been part of a Christian denomination or church that pushed that, but I know they exist. I didn't know that was, I did not know that. I think the African American churches that I've been to, not every woman was wearing them. So I think that I just believed that it was like a choice that they were making. And where I currently am, we're in a very Southern Baptist territory, and lots of the older women will wear fancy church hats. And I don't, for them, I don't know. I would have to ask. Generally, I don't have like a safe Southern Baptist to ask those questions with, because I fall in very different political spectrums than most of the Southern Baptists here in Kentucky. And it's a lot.
Yeah. For me, it's a choice, and for a lot of people, it's not a choice. It's a requirement. You're following the law. And for a lot of people, it's a choice to follow the law. Like, they could because like they feel the obligation, but they don't, like, it's not an obligation that they like grew up being required to do. So it becomes a choice to be obligated, which is kind of like both. But I saw Rev Maggie was talking about wedding veils, which is also an interesting difference. Like in the secular / Christian tradition, the veil is over the face until you lift it up at the altar to kiss the bride.
Yeah.
It's like, it's in the reverse at Jewish weddings. The bride or the brides or whoever wants to be like, and there are non-cis heteronormative ways to do this that are really creative and fun. But speaking kind of in the binary, that like rather the bride comes to the groom without the veil on and he puts it over her face. And that is kind of a callback to the biblical story of when Jacob wanted to marry Rachel, but Leah was the one who was presented to him at the wedding, but he didn't know it was Leah because she had a veil on. So the bride comes to the groom like free-faced to be like, hi, I'm the one.
I am who I say I am.
And then he's like, okay, I got you. And then puts the veil over. It's called the bedecken part. That's the bedecken ritual, or what I call let the bedeckening begin.
Oh my God. I forgot to give everybody on my side a trigger warning. Rabbi Noyo loves a good pun.
Oh yeah. I love dad jokes. I'm gonna be a great
You should
dad.
follow her and you should go check out her series of religious pickup lines, because they are.
And once I get another 40,000 followers, I can get my playlists and then I can put them all in the same list.
I had no idea that they were contingent on numbers. I think that's crazy because it's actually my favorite feature that they've rolled out.
Yeah, waiting for it, and yeah. Anyway, but yeah. So the way I like to treat the bedecken ritual is saying this is the person I'm acknowledging that this is the person I intend to marry. So I like to have the couple either exchange gifts. So like there might be a veiling involved, but like at one wedding, he gave her a necklace and she gave him cufflinks. He put the necklace on her. She put the cufflinks on him. Sometimes words of love are exchanged. Anything to like, sometimes it's just like reading a poem together that like, this is the person I want to, get married to and have children with and go to the grocery store with and get gray hair with, and like the poem about growing old together, and like, this is the person I intend to do those things with. It's just acknowledging that you are the right person. You are the person I want to marry today.
I love that. Well, so I have some Seventh Day and former Seventh Day Adventists in my comments, and they were wondering what does Sabbath look like in Judaism? Because there are certain denominations within Christianity who hold Sabbath in what we consider some sort of sacred space, and they're curious what Sabbath looks like within Judaism.
Yeah, and then tabling our next question is going to be about interfaith weddings.
Yeah.
So the Sabbath, or in Hebrew Shabbat, or in Yiddish Shabbos, which is also Hebrew if you're pronouncing it in the Ashkenazi pronunciation, Shabbos. It just like the bedecken ritual, just like how people cover their hair, everything can look different everywhere you go. So the timing of it is Friday night at sundown to Saturday night at sundown. But literally it's, I want to say, what is it? 19 minutes before sundown on Friday, and then until an hour after sundown on Saturday. It's 25 hours rather than 24. And those 25 hours can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. For me, as soon as I graduated from undergrad, I stopped using my computer on Friday night. Friday night, I turned my computer off and it would get a day to sleep and rest just like me. And I wouldn't turn it on until the sun went down on Saturday, whatever time that was. And recently, and then in rabbinical school, I was living in an apartment. I didn't have a television. I watched TV on my I used my computer on Shabbat because I wanted to watch TV, but I wouldn't check my email and I wouldn't check Facebook. Now I'm finally in a full-time job, and what it looks like now is I actually do check my Facebook on Shabbat. I will also check my work email, but I won't respond to any of those. But it's helpful to me, because I'm working, instead of last year being pandemic unemployed, I was on social media all day out of boredom. And now I'm working all day. And so I'd get home or get to the weekend, and then all I'd want to do is catch up on social media, because that felt more relaxing than the work week.
Right. It's it's decompressing, just the scrolling is decompressing.
Scrolling.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like for some people, electronics are not part of Shabbat at all. It's it's you don't drive a car, you don't handle money. Um so like going shopping is not, but like you could go for a walk through, like, and window shop, as long as you didn't drive to get there. That's like part of your Shabbat practice, is to like take a walk through a market. As long as you're not buying anything, that's fine. um for some people that means not even flipping light switches, taping the little light in your refrigerator so it doesn't turn on and off when you need to get food. For me, I mean, I have ADHD also, which would just complicate that. I would forget. And then it's like, do I just not open the fridge all day and starve? No. Like, I'm going to flip the light switches because it feels more stressful to me to be thinking about that and worrying about that. But I also didn't grow up like that. And for someone who grew up like not flipping light switches on Shabbat, it feels a lot more natural to just keep not doing that. And
Yeah.
it feels more comfortable, and it feels more like Shabbos to not like, that's what makes Shabbat different from the rest of the week. For me, I make Shabbat different from the rest of the week in other ways. Right now, not by much, but like previously without using my computer. So I would do a lot more reading. I would catch up on TV shows that I didn't watch during the week. For a lot of people, Shabbat means doing meditations or going for a walk. There's something that you could take a nap. It's called the Shabbos Shluff, the Shabbat nap. For some people, it's not Shabbat if you didn't take a nap. For some people, it means going to the synagogue. Like, some people go to the synagogue every day, but some people only go to the synagogue Friday nights and or Saturdays. And that's what helps make it feel like Shabbat. Growing up, we always had a Friday night family dinner. We'd light the candles together at the start of Shabbat. We'd say the blessing over the wine, sanctify the day. We'd say the blessing over the challah bread. And then we'd have shake and bake chicken, rice aroni, and sit as a family. Like,
Yeah.
the smell of shake and bake chicken and rice aroni is the smell of Shabbos to me.
I love
That don't smell like Shabbos. So like, it really does look different depending on who you ask.
Yeah. You had a question about interfaith. Was it wedding ceremonies or interfaith marriages?
Both, I probably. We had, would either of you officiate interfaith weddings? And would love to know what both of you think of interfaith marriages. Two separate questions. I don't know if they were intended to mean the same thing, but I think, like you just pointed out, are actually a little different, nuanced questions. You want to go first?
Sure. As far as would I officiate, I would conditionally. I would be like, only if there will also be a rabbi there, because I would not like, if it's truly interfaith, then I would feel like there would need to be some elements of Judaism involved, and I'm clearly not the appropriate person to do it. So if somebody came to me and they were like, hey, we want an interfaith ceremony, we'd like a pastor and a rabbi there, would you be the pastor? I would be in. But if they were like, hey, as a pastor, we are an interfaith couple who are getting married, and we'd like elements of both faiths to be present in our ceremony, would you perform our wedding? I would be like, I would strongly advise you to maybe have two officiants, because I don't feel comfortable handling the parts of it that are outside of my faith tradition. That feels not super respectful.
That's so interesting to me, because from the conversations I've had with other Jewish clergy folks, is that those who will do interfaith weddings will do them, but some draw the line at co-officiating.
Really?
Yeah. So like, I did my first Jewish wedding was an interfaith wedding. He had grown up Catholic, was non-practicing, was like me. He loved Judaism. He wasn't being pushed into conversion because his partner really wanted, like, if he was going to join Judaism, that it be on his own time, on his own terms. And she didn't want to pressure him. But they wanted a Jewish wedding. It was still considered faith because he was not of Jewish status, like an official Jewish status. So I did a Jewish wedding for them, and he wasn't Jewish, and that was fine. That was fine with me. Yeah. I'm currently working with a couple who they're not just interfaith, they're multi-faith. He is Jewish, she is Catholic, and they are both at least somewhat practicing. And so there will be a Catholic priest at the wedding. And this is new to me. And I said yes to this because I don't have a reason to say no yet. I feel like, as you know, part of it was going to be getting to know this priest, and we finally got to meet about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and like we put together the run of show, basically, and it was it seemed like we were going to be able to blend the faith traditions together really quite nicely, and you know, for me, it was going to be like, if I do it and I hate it afterwards, then I'll just never do it again. But like, I don't want to say no before I've actually tried it out, because I don't have a reason to say no beforehand, personally.
And I will say it's less complicated for me being a non-denominational clergy person, because we don't have quite the pomp and circumstances that a lot of denominations or more liturgical traditions have, where there are things that quote unquote have to be done or need to be done. The traditional wedding in a non-denominational setting is like what you would see in a rom-com. You know, it's very very casual, so it would be very easy to pull pieces. Like, there's no part of it that as someone that got married in that tradition, there's no part of it I was like, cut that, we don't need that, let's keep this ceremony under 10 minutes, like, cut that. There's people don't
oh my God, I'm like, 45 minutes is about as short as it can be. And that's with everything being optional.
So I think for me, like, I would be willing to do it so long as it wasn't something that was I could cater what I was doing to create as much space as like the rabbi would need to do what needed to be done, and I would not need to take up space. That is not something I can speak for other denominations or traditions on, because that is very specific to mine.
I'm also non-denominational. I'm unaffiliated with any movement. I know that there are some movements have some rules about interfaith weddings. Like the conservative movement currently does not allow their rabbis to, at least publicly, do some of them do it, you know, under the radar, because they disagree with the ban on this. But like, it's really hush hush. But as a movement, it's forbidden. I know that the Reconstructing movement and the Reform movement do allow it. We have Rabbi Sandra, who's a Reconstructing rabbi, in the comments right now, who said,
I love her. Hi,
Rabbi Sandra. I will do interfaith weddings, but will not co-officiate. Okay. And she says, I'll bring in elements of other traditions and even invite a minister, etc., to speak or say words or offer a blessing. But that's different from co-officiating.
Absolutely. So, and I guess that if it caused tension for the couple, like if the person that was Jewish had a rabbi who said that, my advice to them would be like, great, then have the rabbi do it. It sounds like that rabbi is more than capable and willing to engage both sides of this. I don't need to be part of it, you know, because I think that I don't know if you know this, but Christians like to center ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, it's like it's kind of the way it works in this country. I'm trying to see if I don't know if Rabbi Sandra, if you want to be a moderator, but I've added you in case you'd like to. And
I was telling Rabbi Noyo that she should be sure that she has moderators in her lives, because I know that other friends of mine who are Jewish creators, their lives can get very unfriendly very quickly, and it ends up getting them kicked out of the live. And I don't want that to happen.
Yeah.
Because people can just scroll and like pop in and just be hateful for no reason.
Well, it sounds like Rabbi Sandra's way of like having somebody step in to do something that's an element of another faith is kind of what it's going to look like at the wedding that I'm doing next month. Oh my God, it's almost January.
Can't even handle.
So like because there are a lot more elements to a Jewish wedding. Like when I work with a couple, I offer them what I call the smorgasbord of options. And I have personally, as a Jewish clergy person who does weddings, my one requirement is it must be a 2-ring ceremony. The historically traditional Jewish wedding has 1 ring. It treats one of the people as not a person. I don't do weddings. If that is the kind of wedding you want in order to be halachically sound, like in line with Jewish law, I'm not going to be the right rabbi for you, because I do not want a 1-ring ceremony, which actually gives me a lot of freedom, because if I'm doing a 2-ring ceremony and I'm not looking at halakha, Jewish law, as like a standard that has to be met, everything can be creative and like molded to fit the couple. So I give a lot of options, and I say we can do the 7 blessings. The 7 blessings have a particular historically traditional text in the Hebrew. If you don't like the original Hebrew, here are like 18 different translations that are interpretive. If you don't like any of those, pick 7 people that you want to honor and have them each write you a blessing. Like, also,
I love that.
Do that during the ceremony. Do it before cutting the cake. Like, it's all can be worked with. But for me, it has to be a 2-ring ceremony, and there must be magic words that are exchanged at the ring ceremony that kind of effect the marriage. There are historically traditional words that are used. If I'm doing an interfaith marriage, using those words, which have to do with like, according to Moses and the way the Jewish people do it, doesn't work if one of you is not Jewish. Like, so we can pick our own magic words.
Yeah.
So I've given them all of these options of different rituals that they want to incorporate. And they've picked, a whole bunch of them. And like, there's going to be a couple of readings. One of them is going to be from the priest. 3 of them are going to be from other people. And then the priest is going to do like the Catholic vows exchange, which is the part that effects the marriage on the Catholic side.
Yeah.
Like, we tried to strike a little bit of a balance of like, who's talking and when, and that we both get to offer a blessing, and we both, so in this case, we really did want it to look like co-officiating. But in terms of all the things that needed to be done, one thing needed to be done on his side, one thing needed to be done on my side, and a whole bunch of other things wanted to be done on both sides.
Yeah.
So like, we're making it a co-officiating situation, but it didn't have to look like that.
Yeah.
So it's just, there's so many different ways that you can do it.
Yeah. It is interfaith marriage. In your experience, are there traditions within Judaism where interfaith marriage is discouraged? I know that you talked about conservative Judaism. So growing up in church, you're taught that you shall not be unequally yoked. And that's in the New Testament. And they leverage that to mean that you shouldn't be with someone who is not also a Christian. And even more specifically, like as a woman, you shouldn't date or marry a man who is not your spiritual superior. Like, you need to be equally yoked. You need to be, and they make it mean, it's not a good interpretation of that verse anyway, but that's how it's used. And so we're very much discouraged from any kind of, and obviously no one in the church would be like, we discourage interfaith marriages, because that sounds terrible. And I always want to be like, if something sounds terrible, maybe that's because it is terrible. But they kind of leverage it with this idea that you will be carrying the bulk of the spiritual load, and that it's just one more difference between you and a spouse that has to be dealt with and handled. And while I don't disagree with that, that's true of any differences. Like, all differences require some level of communication. So I'm curious if how it's treated in Judaism. Is it treated with that same idea of like, this is a really terrible idea, and if you do it, you're going to be miserable?
Well, before I answer that, a question from one of my comments is, do you have a better interpretation of that verse?
Do I have a better interpretation of the verse?
What is better interpretation of that verse? If you've heard of one, or if there is another way that you might interpret that verse.
So it's been so long since I studied this. I'll have to reach back into the recesses of my mind for a second. So traditionally it's talking about like oxen and how you'll have two oxen who are
right.
And the way that it's taught is that if one oxen is stronger than the other, then that oxen is going to be like pulling the other weaker ox along, and it's not going to, but that's actually not a good, just from like a agricultural standpoint, that's not what happens. A strong ox is not just going to like take off and like drag the weaker one along with it in the yoke. I can't remember now. No, Candy, you're fine. Adam, I just saw you pop in. Do you remember what the correct interpretation of the verse about being unequally yoked is? I should have my computer up so I could look at my notes. I have all kinds of notes for today, but I did them on my phone, which is a problem.
Maybe, somebody, one of my followers says, I've heard that verse interpreted as values and that men need to make space for women in their marriages, or that spouses need to make the right space. The comment got cut off. It sounds like rather than the stronger ox yanking the weaker one along, it's more of the weaker one holding back the stronger one.
Well, so from an agricultural standpoint, a yoke would be fitted specifically to oxen. You wouldn't just have a yoke that would go on any, like it would go on your yoxen.
They were customized.
Right. And so the idea of it being unequally yoked is could it be about being at odds with each other? See, now I wish I had my book. I have like this book that I have taken notes in over the years of when I started deconstructing my faith. That's basically like things that I was taught badly. And that's one of the verses that I have always, now that I look back at it, I'm like, oh, I was taught badly. It had to do with the way that the yoke fit on top of the oxen, and it not being like it's impossible to unequally yoke two oxen because it literally would not fit. And so the idea, I think, there being that if you're going to be in partnership with anybody, with somebody, understanding how that relationship fits together, and if you're going to fit in that relationship together, it has nothing to do like one being stronger and one being less strong. It's about understanding that you have to mold your context to fit your situation, and you can't just insert people in or out of that thing to make it good. It's not, I think, especially in Christianity, we are raised with this idea that it is that marriage is the ultimate ending. Like everyone should be married. That is what people want. And that if you are not married, then there's something wrong with you. And so there's so many ways to look at a verse that talks about something unrelated to marriage or unrelated to a hierarchical marriage and create it into that thing. People in the comments are going crazy over here. I think Christians wrongly make it about superiority. I agree. The verse is about being yoked to, about the danger of syncretism. Yeah. So all that said, it is not at all about like, don't marry non-believers.
Right.
But that's how it's leveraged. So in the Christian tradition, a lot of pastoral people will advise against what they call missionary dating. Yeah. A lot to unpack there.
We can get there if we want.
So I'm curious if that same sort of tension is held within Judaism, if there is a tension of interfaith relationships the same way.
Yes and no. So the conservative movement does not allow its rabbis to do interfaith marriages, but they have no problem welcoming interfaith couples into their communities.
Oh, that's
and
so interesting.
this is one of the things that I find most insulting is communities and clergy who say, we are okay with you before you get married and after you get married, but we will not do the marriage.
Interesting.
Like, it just, that really rubs me wrong. Like, that feels invalidating. Like, do you actually accept them before or after their marriage if you don't do the actual marriage? I grew up in the Reform movement, which does allow interfaith marriages, like at the rabbi's or cantor's discretion. And my childhood rabbi had requirements. And one of the requirements was that the couple met with him for a series of meetings. And I think there were 3 requirements, and I can't remember what the third one was, but the second one was that they had to agree that they would raise the children Jewish and nothing else. And I have a problem with that requirement personally, because a marriage is between 2 consenting, or 3, or however many adults, not children. The children are not getting married. It is about whether these people who are going to be standing at the front of the room in public to commit their love to each other, are they right for each other? If these 2 people, if I can say with some amount of confidence that I think that they are good for each other, that is good. I could do that wedding. I could stand behind that, stand in front of that, literally. If I don't think they are good for each other, if there are red flags, then I would say, I don't think I'm the rabbi to do your marriage, and I think that there are some things that you need to talk about more or get therapy for before you actually move forward with this. And if you choose to move forward with it now, then I'm not the person to do it, because I'm not comfortable with that. But there are no children getting married.
Mm-hmm.
And for many marriages, there is not even an expectation. There is an expectation that there will be children when there may not even be children. Hold that thought. Yes. Hi. Ari's here. He's done with his podcast.
Can I come in?
You can come in. There's not much room in this corner.
All right. Don't move anything. I'm good. I'm just gonna. Hello.
This is Ari.
It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So if you're requiring any potential future children to be Jewish when there may not even be any future children, some couples don't want children. It makes no sense to me to make that requirement, and to also be all up in this couple's business about their children when they may not have made that decision yet. And on top of that, I think that there are a lot of interfaith couples who who have children, raise them very well, and maybe raise them Jewish and maybe raise them something else, or maybe raise them Jewish and something else. And that does get complicated when it comes to Jewish status across different denominations and movements. But the wedding itself, I do not make requirements on future potential children that do not exist.
Yeah.
And I have a problem with that kind of a requirement. But there are a lot of rabbis that have that requirement, even in the Reform movement and other movements that have that allow their clergy to do interfaith marriages. Yeah. I'm just checking on my comments here.
My comments discussing the idea of an interfaith marriage and the complications that would arise just relationally, which I'm not saying there wouldn't be, obviously would be. I think part of it too, though, is that for the majority of Christians, the extent of what we understand about interfaith marriages, in my anecdotal experience, comes from television or movies or things that are maybe not everything that I know about converting to Judaism up until probably 3 or 4 years ago came from Sex and the City, which is not a reliable resource for anything.
What? For anything.
For anything.
But I just wanted to add in my comments, I was taught that the oxen would pull in different directions. I also want to add that you know, to that point of like, is it discouraged? It is really widely discouraged. It's against Jewish law for a Jew to marry a non-Jew. Like, I mean, so for people who live within the structure of Jewish law, it's a no-brainer. Like, they wouldn't even date somebody non-Jewish. As my mother would say, if you can date somebody non-Jewish, you can fall in love with somebody non-Jewish, and you can marry somebody non-Jewish. So you just don't start with the dating. I did. I dated non-Jews in high school and college. And my parents always said, we will love you and support you no matter who you marry, as long as they treat you well.
Yeah.
But we think you'll be happier if you marry someone Jewish. They're right, of course, about that.
I think there's definitely an ease that comes from being known and knowing that person, and they're like just an ease of knowing what to expect and how to engage things. Like, that's not untrue.
Right. But like, I've struggled with that as well, because, you know, you've got people who come to Judaism later in life, convert to Judaism, and didn't have a Jewish childhood. I used to have, like, when I was in college, and I was at the cusp of like not stopping dating non-Jews and only dating Jews. I was like, would I date this is a vulnerable moment here. I went through a brief anti-convert phase because I did not know if I would be comfortable dating somebody who didn't have a Jewish childhood, because that was something I wanted to share with my partner, which is an unacceptable way to be. Like, it's also highly generalizing. There are lots of born Jews who don't have the Jewish childhood that I thought I wanted to share with my partner. So like, lots of things wrong with that. But that, like, I was trying to figure out, why would I only date Jews? Because I was coming off of dating non-Jews. And so this was like part of that process of getting to where I am now. And I know that there's part of the interfaith issue is that Jews are such a small population in the world, and there are a lot of people, and this is very much a generational gap, but not exclusively. There are a lot of people my age and even younger who are like, no, we can't intermarry because the future of the Jewish people is at stake here. Which is also, like, statistically disproved. Like, and not just from, like, anecdotally speaking, but like statistically, there is no reason that being married to somebody who's not Jewish will make your family less Jewish, or your children, should you have them, less involved in the Jewish community, or less likely to grow up into Jewish practicing, on any level, adults.
Yeah.
Often it's the non-Jewish parent who doesn't have trauma from Hebrew school, who's willing to bring the kids to Hebrew school, and to bring the kids to their service requirements on Shabbat, and to go to the bar mitzvah study sessions with the rabbi, because they don't have that experience already that they hated when they were growing up. So, like, often it's the non-Jewish parent who's actually perpetuating the Jewish future here. Like,
yeah,
and that's not uncommon. So I know my school, my rabbinical school, my institution is currently revisiting the ban on rabbis marrying non-Jews. There is one school that I know of right now, it's Rabbi Sandra's alma mater, the Reconstructing Rabbinical College, that allows entry students into the rabbinical and cantorial programs. I think they have a cantorial program, who are married to non-Jewish partners, or who are partnered with non-Jews. And I have a friend who just entered that program, who is married to a Unitarian Universalist minister, and he was interested in going to Hebrew college, and they lived in Boston. But Hebrew college, where I went, still has the ban.
Interesting.
And so they were forced to, not that there's much of a force in going to RRC because it's a great school, but like there was no choice. There was no option. It was RRC or nothing. And which is unfortunate because that's a great person who's going to make a great rabbi that other schools refused to even consider because of his husband. And I actually, my school is revisiting the ban conversation right now. We as alumni got a notification that the current faculty and students are doing some learning on it, and they will soon be reaching out to the alum to get our input. I'm very excited to give my input. I think you know what it's going to be. I've been arguing for the ban to be lifted for a long time. And while I'm glad that it's being revisited, I'm not hopeful that it's going to change this time. I don't think it's going to. I just don't think that it's gonna pass through enough people to say yes, lift the ban for it to actually happen. But I was having a conversation on Facebook with a friend on Facebook just today who's like, yeah, I think that the ban should be in place because I want my rabbis to be exemplar role models, like be the quintessential Jews. And I'm like, and their partner makes that not true. How? Like, I don't, it kind of, the conversation kind of devolved because another friend thought that this person was a troll. and then that person was blaming me for having friends who just would call people trolls. And I'm like, listen, if you sound like a troll to somebody, like if that's how you're engaging and that's how you're coming across, that sounds like something you need to work on. It's not about my friend choice here. Like, but like I literally don't understand how if the non-Jewish partner does not un-Jewish the Jewish partner and does not invalidate any of their Jewish practices. And this person was saying like, but it's a biblical no-no. And I'm like, we admit people who eat pork. Right. I drive on God. I was admitted. Those are also biblical no-nos. Like, why is this the hill people die on? Why is this the line?
I feel that about so many things within religion.
Graduate. Sorry, what?
Yeah. No, I would say I ask myself that question in different religious conversations all the time. Why is this the hill we're dying on? I think that's so often in church context. I'm like, is this really? This is where we're going to plant our flag here? And yep, okay, all right.
And it's so hurtful because there are like, and in the same way that atheist Jews need rabbis who are atheists, we need not that they need their specific rabbi to be an atheist, but to see that there are atheist rabbis. That's representation. Jews of color need to see rabbis of color. Right. Jews who are men need to see rabbis who are not men. Jews who are partnered with non-Jews need to see rabbis who are partnered with non-Jews, because those are rabbis who know what that experience of being a Jew in a long-term committed relationship with a non-Jew is like. They know what that's like. I don't know what it's like.
Wait, you caught some folks' attention with your atheist rabbi comment. So I'm familiar with what you're talking about. And I would love for you to expound on what it means to be a non-religious Jew. I'm not to pivot the conversation, but since you brought up the idea of atheist rabbis to what it means to be an atheist rabbi or a non-religious Jew and all of the variations, not all of them, because we don't have that kind of time, but what that looks like and a way to explain it for some folks who are not familiar with you would never hear someone be like, yeah, my atheist pastor.
I'm agnostic. Hi. Actually, Ari learned that today, apparently. I didn't know he didn't know that I was agnostic. But that's funny. As I was leaving his room while he was getting set up, because he started his podcast like half an hour before our live, and his podcast buddy showed up, and like I gave him a kiss and I said, have fun. And his friend goes, ew, that's gross. And then we made a joke about like, I'm leaving. You'll never have to see me again. Thank God. And then Ari goes, well, she's a rabbi, so she can actually thank God. And I was like, well, I'm agnostic, so maybe not. And he goes, you're agnostic? I didn't know that.
So what does it look like to be an agnostic rabbi or an atheist rabbi?
I mean, it's for Jews, again, like depending on how much you want to live within the structure of Jewish law, like for Jews who live within the structure of halakha, it's a no-brainer. It's the same as like getting married, a woman covers her hair, or like, you know, just like on Friday afternoon, you tape the light inside your fridge so that you don't use lights on Shabbat. Like for people who are living within that framework, belief in God is a no-brainer. It just is a fact. It is reality, and it is a core part of their faith system. And all of Judaism revolves around that relationship with God. Following all of Jewish law is a means of getting closer to God. It is all about relationship building with the divine. For people who don't believe in God, and I think that there are a lot of Jews who don't believe in God, that's not what Judaism is about. Like, for me, I started keeping kosher because I grew up in southern New Hampshire, and I could count on one hand the number of Jews who went to my school. And I wanted to be able to tell the lunch lady, I won't be taking milk today because it's a meat meal and I'm Jewish and I keep kosher. Because like I wanted to assert my Jewish identity. It had nothing to do with keeping kosher for God. It had nothing to do with getting me closer to that divine relationship. And it had everything to do with my personal identity as a Jew. Same as like, I don't wear this to remind me that God is before me at all times. Like I wear this to be a public Jew. So I like personally, I don't know if there is a God. I say blessings in which they translate to like, you know, Baruch atah Adoshem, like blessed are you, God, you know, sovereign of the universe or source of all life, or however you want to translate it. Like who brings forth bread from the earth. Like I say that before I eat pizza.
Yeah.
And my dad actually asked me like a few months ago, he's like, if you're not sure you believe in God, why do you say that? And I was like, that's a good question. But like, you know, if I do, like, if there is a God, then great. God, I can accept that. And like, I've done the thing that God wants. If God wants.
What's interesting is I really think in Christianity, there are people who fall into that space and maybe aren't willing to admit it because we're shamed for that. It's called going through the motions. If you go to church and you say your prayers and you read your scripture, but you're not sure if you believe, or even if you don't believe and you still do it, it's called going through the motions, and you're told that you are dishonoring God by doing that. And I think it's so interesting because I really think that I was talking with an atheist the other day, and I said, you know, the truth is I believe in God very much from a construct standpoint, not necessarily a factual standpoint. And that was very mind-blowing for them. They're like, aren't you a pastor? And I was like, yeah, I think you can be a pastor and believe that. I think that a lot of pastors, especially the ones who get burnt out and leave the ministry, spend a significant amount of time engaging faith from a construct standpoint and not necessarily a factual standpoint. And maybe they would experience less burnout if there was more space for that sort of Judaism has always struck me as a blessing in the sense that there is so much space for questions and for arguing and for disagreement without it being a reflection of your faith status.
Yeah.
And it's not like Christianity. And I've always felt like very envious in that regard.
No religion. Like you can do zero Jewish things, do no Jewish ritual, follows zero Jewish law. You are still officially Jewish. Like you are Jewish. You can't un-Jewish someone just because they don't do anything Jewish or they violate everything. Like it's more than a religion. It's a culture. it gets tricky. People want to be like, you know, you have Jewish blood no matter what you do or don't do. But like that gets into like not C territory because blood quantum is not something we do. You can have 93% Ashkenazi, you know, 23andMe results, but all that means is you've got a lot of Ashkenazi ancestors. It doesn't mean that your parents were Jewish and raised you Jewish. It doesn't mean you're Jewish. Like if you want to engage
so
with your
much
heritage,
of this from following Shekinah. Her content is almost
yeah.
The amount of trolls that she gets and the people that she has to
Yeah.
like defend her Judaism to is
yeah. I mean, Shekinah has so much patience. I can't even begin. Like, I have noticed personally, like, especially when I get into it with like narrow-minded Orthodox Jews, not to say all Orthodox Jews are narrow-minded because not a monolith, but there are a lot of narrow-minded Orthodox Jews who like to get into my comments and be like, all you reformies are fake Jews. And I'm like, I'm not reform. Reform Judaism is valid and you're an asshole. And I'm like, oh no, I'm not acting very rabbinic, am I?
Well, you know, we're you know, there's a lot of room for wiggles.
But yeah, I had a couple other comments I wanted to bring up. Somebody had said that they'd never seen a rabbi who's married to a non-Jew. That is pretty rare, because most rabbinical schools do not still have the ban. So I know that a friend of mine who's in his first year at RRC will, when he graduates and is ordained, he'll be a rabbi married to a UU minister. One of my schoolmates, she kept her relationship secret.
I was going to ask if that ever comes into play, or if people like put off getting married till the end of it.
She's the only person I know who had a secret relationship with a non-Jew, and the year after I think it was a year later, they got married in the pandemic. She graduated a year before I did, and I graduated into the pandemic. So she is a rabbi married to a non-Jew. I'm sure there are more. But like our school is not affiliated with a movement. And so like the reform movement has the CCAR, which is the something of American rabbis.
Okay.
The conservative movement has the RA, which is the Rabbinic Assembly. Like these are official organizations of rabbis affiliated with those movements. If you are in that organization and then marry a non-Jew, you will be booted from the organization. The nice thing about my school is not being affiliated. We don't have an organization overseeing the institution. So my schoolmate got married and had no consequences. You can't take away the ordination.
Really?
Like, yeah. I suppose you could. The word that we use for ordination is smicha, which literally means reliance, as in like the school asserts, the institution and the rabbis bestowing the ordination on us assert that this is somebody I rely on as a rabbi. Therefore, if you trust this institution, you can rely on them as rabbi too. Yeah. So
it's so much cooler than ours.
So it's possible that like the institution could renege on that and say like, we no longer rely on this person. But like, I've only ever heard of that happening with like individual, not institutional ordinations, but like if you're studying under an individual rabbi, like in Israel or whatever, and that rabbi gives you smicha, then like that rabbi could take that smicha away by being like, I no longer will, and they're one person, so they can do it. But like, I don't know, maybe it's harder as an institution, or maybe the institution, maybe Hebrew College is just like, whatever, like, we don't care that much. But a friend of mine who did the cantorial program was engaged to a non-Jew. He was in process of becoming Jewish, but his conversion was not scheduled until after her ordination, and the school still didn't let her get ordained as a cantor. She was forced to delay her ordination by a year until he had converted. And the whole thing was kind of fucked up because they had been led to believe that she'd be able to be ordained because he was in the conversion process. So it was like really sour.
Yeah.
And so like, I don't know. There were some other comments that I they keep coming.
That's okay.
A Jew is a Jew. Yes. Somebody had asked a while back. I don't even know if they're still here.
That's okay.
Tips.
Everyone in my comments is so appreciative of all of the information and knowledge that you're sharing. So like, even if they're there, we'll still get stuff out of it.
Oh yeah. Somebody had asked like tips for somebody who wants to convert, and like reach out to a local synagogue.
Yeah.
Like pool hopping, but shul hopping, shul being a synagogue. Like reach out if you have multiple communities, Jewish communities, congregations, or like communities that are not congregations, rabbis who work in those communities, rabbis who don't work in those, like reach out to as many as you can. Find out what they're about. We're in a world of Zoom services. Like join their services on Shabbat if they're streaming. Like see if you like it. Do they do musical instruments? Do you like that? Do you dislike that?
Yeah.
Do they not do musical instruments? Do you like that or dislike? So like kind of go shopping for a community and like start talking to rabbis, because only by rabbis are open to starting these conversations. Like we're not weirded out by people out of the blue sending us an email and being like, hey, I've been thinking about Judaism. I grew up, Catholic or Episcopalian or whatever. And like, or I have a lot of Jewish friends and I really like it. And I think I want, to explore Judaism. Some rabbis will do the 3 rejections thing, which is only to see if you'll come back because you really want it. I think that's stupid. I don't reject. I invite a conversation. And if through the course of that conversation, I'm like, you've been thinking about this for about 5 minutes. You're not ready to start converting yet. And I'll give them some reading and like send them on their way. And like maybe in a year or 2, they'll come back. But like some of these folks have been already reading for years or thinking about this for like a decade. Yeah. And they're itching to get going. And like the 3 rejections is just like, what's the point? We're struggling as a people to like, the future of the Jewish people is at stake, but
also let's reject people.
But let's reject people instead, like worry about interfaith marriage. So I would say like reach out to rabbis, like just start conversations. You will get to know whether it's a good match or not. And if a rabbi's not a good match, that's okay. Say, you can even tell them and say like, I think I'm looking for another kind of entryway into Judaism, and I really appreciate your time and all the questions you've answered. And if you have any other recommendations for other rabbis they could be talking to, like we understand we're not going to be the best match for every person out there.
Yeah, for sure.
Some people, I'm not going to be a rabbi for a lot of Orthodox Jews because I'm not a man and because I'm not Orthodox. Like
just that one small hiccup.
Yeah, that doesn't offend me. What offends me is when they say I'm not allowed to be a rabbi for anybody, because most of the Jewish world accepts my smicha, accepts me as a rabbi. You don't have to. I won't be a rabbi. There are other rabbis that will be happy that will be a better fit. So like, if when you're looking into conversion, it's not a great match, it's just like finding a new therapist. Just ask for a recommendation, and if they don't have one, go to Google. Like it feels more intimidating than it is, and I understand that. Like it does feel intimidating, but like I promise we're pretty good natured about it. And if the rabbi's not, then you've dodged a bullet anyway. So
that feels very accurate. Somebody was saying, my mom is an evangelical obsessed with Jewish practices. It feels very icky, but I can't express why very well. I will own, as long as we're owning mistakes we used to make. For those of you who are new here and you missed Rabbi Noyo owning something from her, so I'm not out of the left field with this one. I have been to a Messianic Seder, a Messianic Passover dinner. And I remember at the time being deeply like, oh, this is so cool. I love how they've woven Jesus into, like they've connected Jesus back into every point that's being made. And now the person that I am today looks back at that and is like, oh,
Yikes. That was
Oh,
it was not the exciting move I wanted it to be. And I think that one of the things that I have said with folks within Christianity is there is this desire to be connected to Judaism as we recognize the Old Testament as our parent document, basically, like as our spiritual lineage. But no one is ever taught. Well, that's not, I don't want to say no one is ever taught. It is not often taught how to hold a good boundary of like respect for something that is still a living, breathing religion and people who engage it. We just are kind of, I don't want to say we're explicitly taught that we have free reign to tramp through it, but we definitely act like we've been explicitly taught that we have free reign to tramp through it. And so what are your thoughts about Christians engaging what they see as like, ooh, cool, fun rituals that are actually sacred practices within Judaism?
Well, I would first say that I don't think it matters so much whether it's still living and breathing or not. I think that there are ancient practices that are still not ours, even though they're nobody's if they're dead, but like they were somebody's, and if they don't belong to us, they don't belong. I was just reminded of this thing that I went to Jewish summer camp like all of my childhood, and something that we used to say at camp was, if it's wet and it's not yours, don't touch it. And I don't know why this just came to me. I don't have like a perfect analogy here. I don't know what the wet part is like, but like, if it's not yours, don't touch it. Like, kind of feels relevant. There's two parts to this. Messianic Judaism is not Judaism. It is Christianity disguised as Judaism in order to target Jews. It came out of evangelism, and it's its own problem. So I'll put that over here.
Set that there and put a pin in it.
Christian satyrs are part of, I think, what you mentioned about this bigger idea of like feeling like Christian people feeling like they have free reign over all this stuff. And I think in particular, Jewish stuff. There's like, Judaism is not the only thing that is appropriated, obviously. You know, yoga has been bastardized. I've got this behind me, this weird, is it a dream catcher? I'm not really sure. Dream catchers. That's part of a culture that doesn't belong to me either. I made a Jewish dream catcher, like with a Jewish star design in the middle instead of like all of the different, things to catch the bad dream. Like, that wasn't really mine to do that with. It's not my culture. So I think that there's certainly a lot in the world that people just kind of take as they please. But I think that there's a special affinity that Christians have for doing that to Jewish stuff, because it always comes back to this. Jesus was Jewish. Jesus had a
That's what they're talking about in my comments.
Jesus had a seder to feel close to Jesus. Jesus was Jewish. I want to light a menorah to feel close to Jesus. Jesus didn't light a fucking menorah.
Can we make shirts? Can we co-sell shirts that says Jesus never lit a menorah?
Yes. I mean, I'm down. And like the Seder, also Jesus lived, and I mean, I know that you know a lot of this, and I'm saying
please speak for the benefit of everyone listening.
Yeah. Jesus was a second temple Jew. That means the second temple was still standing. It was the second temple because the first one was already destroyed by people who hate the Jews. Later, the second temple was also destroyed by people who hate the Jews. There has not been a third temple built yet. So we live in post-second temple rabbinic Judaism. It looks entirely different from the Judaism that Jesus practiced. Jesus's Seder involved actual sacrifice. Mine does not. Like, if you go to a church and it's being run by Christians for Christians, they're gonna A, do it wrong, and B, do it definitely not like Jesus did. Like, so they're gonna be doing it wrong on both counts. Not like real Jews today, and not like the one Jew that they say that they care about. And it is not actually, like, it's not about Jesus. Like, Jesus was a Jew, but like Jewish practices are not about this one random Jewish schmo. Like, if he was a real person, which, like, I don't know if he was, I wasn't around, like, he might have been, but he wasn't anybody special.
Right.
He only became special later, for reasons, but like, to the Jewish community, he was just a hippie rabbi, and not even a rabbi in the sense of, like, he wasn't a rabbi like I'm a rabbi. He wasn't a rabbi like Moses, that gingy Jew, is a rabbi. He's not a rabbi like, Chabad on TikTok, who I don't recommend you follow because he's really problematic. Not all Chabad is as problematic as him. I've had some really good experiences with Chabad. Nothing is a monolith. Just saying, there are lots of different kinds of rabbis on TikTok, and Jesus was not like any of them. The Seder that we do today is about the Israelites' exodus from Egypt. And if every piece of it is being brought back to Jesus, then it's not actually fulfilled. Like, it's not the Seder, and it's not fulfilling the Seder requirements. And it's actually not about the Israelites' escape from Egypt. And like, it's not about what it's about anymore. Like,
well, and what you just said is such an important thing to consider, because we're talking about a practice that relates back to escape from oppression. Modern Christians have no connection with being oppressed, despite our very best efforts to find some form of oppression to claim. And I think that part of what I have learned from a lot of the Jewish people that I listen to is that the idea that we would co-opt a tradition that is based in freedom from oppression as our way to anchor ourselves into Judaism and like that spiritual legacy is super offensive, because it's not oppression that we have the spiritual impact of going forward, let alone the actual impact of, or the actual history. Like, I don't, as a Christian, I can say that I have this spiritual lineage that dates back into the Abrahamic time, but I don't carry the scars of the oppression since that time. And so to practice something that is entirely about recognizing that oppression and that freedom of oppression feels real not great.
Yeah. Not to mention that quite a bit of Jewish oppression was caused by Christians. So, like, yeah. But I think I think there's kind of two parts to it, which is one, Jesus was a Jew, therefore I want to do Jewish stuff to get close to Jesus. But then there's the other thing, which I think Christians are certainly not the only ones who fall victim to this, but like, I want to have an elevated spiritual experience. And I think this thing is going to help me get that. So this is where I see like non-Jews discovering the shofar and just like blowing shofar in the middle of their very not Jewish services or prayer sessions. Like, that's not yours anymore than like the dream catcher. Like, yoga, and like, I've done yoga, and I've done Western yoga. I've never done Eastern yoga. Like, I would love to experience Eastern proper led yoga, like from somebody for whom yoga is part of an actual spiritual experience and not just like a way to be fit, like, which is the only way I've experienced it. So like, I mean, we all kind of fall victim to this idea. Like, I don't know, wearing certain types of garb, like we see messianic prayer shawls all the time, which are Jewish talits, prayer shawls, but have like the fish emblem on the end or whatever, or like from the New Testament. And I'm like, it's just so gross feeling, because like that's my culture's thing, with somebody else, with my oppressor's culture like stamped on it. It's just it's more than offensive. It's like, it hurts to see. So like it kind of becomes twofold, which I think Christians, like you said, are always trying to like claim some kind of oppression. It's not something you want to be, though. Like, a lot of people,
but in the New Testament, it talks a lot about like the world is going to hate you because they've hated me. And so we have this idea that if the world is not hating us, then we're not doing it right. We're not doing what Jesus wanted us to do. If the world, so interestingly, I would argue that the majority of American evangelical Christianity isn't doing it right, and the world does fucking hate them. And I want to feel like so then it just becomes this self-fulfilling apologetics thing where it's like, okay, see, now we're on to something. And so oppression is a marker of successful faith by the Western American evangelical standard.
Yeah. I read something about missionaries, that they are designed to make you feel alienated, in order to, like, it's kind of that, like, you go to a place and you're instructed to behave in a certain way that makes everybody be like, get the fuck out of here, like, no. And then they go home to their home community being like, these people didn't want to be saved, and I feel like I failed. And then the community, hugs them, embraces them, and they're like, you did the best you could, and like, that's all Jesus asks of you. And like, it creates an us and them. It strengthens the cult kind of mind of the bond of the community, the in community, and it creates an othering of everybody outside that community that is extraordinarily toxic. And a lot of people don't want to talk about that. And I don't feel like I'm actually somebody who should be the one talking about it, because I'm not in like an evangelic Jews don't proselytize. So like, this is not something that I'm a part of, but like, it's
I love you.
Talked about enough, especially amongst people who need to be hearing it.
Well, unfortunately, the people who need to be hearing it are not always the most receptive. So I have a very interesting question for you.
And then I have one for you.
Oh, I'm so excited. Okay. Well, is the one that you have, do you feel like it's going to be a long answer or a short answer?
Probably short, but you never know.
You ask yours first, because mine's I think gonna be a doozy.
Lev Shmoo wants to know, what's pastor's stance on New Covenant business?
New Covenant business.
It's like just that whole New Covenant business.
So that is a complicated. I'm gonna now, because we've promised a short answer, I'm gonna try to keep it short. So I was definitely raised in like the New Covenant supersedes the Old Covenant, and so we're not under the Old Covenant now. I would say that where I sit now is that I view the Christian Bible as man's evolving understanding of God. And I don't hold to an inerrant view or even an infallible view of Scripture. And so I don't need to be concerned with what is the New Covenant or the Old Covenant, because to me, it's all the evolving understanding of like humanity's evolving understanding of God. And so there are plenty of things within the New Covenant that I'm like, fuck that. Absolutely not. I'm not doing that. And the truth is, I always get very confused when people accuse progressive Christians in particular of cherry picking from the New Testament, because I want to be like, but so do you. There's a lot in the New Testament that you don't do. And you do theological gymnastics to get out of doing it and like explaining away why it doesn't matter, but it's not different. And also cherry picking happens because some cherries are ripe and are meant to be picked, and some are not yet ripe and need to stay on the tree until it is time, and some have ripened to the point of falling to the ground and are no longer usable. So actually, I'm okay being called a cherry picker. It doesn't bother me.
It's pick and choose Jews is what we're called. And or watered down.
I'm so sorry that I'm laughing. It's just the rhyme caught me off guard.
Nobody uses it, but they should. Like, people just say, you can't pick and choose Judaism. And I'm like, you pick and choose Jews. It's right there. Just call it. But there's nothing wrong with it. Like, I keep kosher and I drive, but like, I don't avoid driving on Shabbat. Like, I'm picking and choosing. I'm doing what feels right for my Jewish soul. Like,
right. And so
at
some point we're going to get to the conversation about Leviticus, but like, I don't struggle. I have no tension with the verses in Leviticus about men with men, because I don't have a problem going, I don't believe in the inerrancy of the Bible. So even if that is what that means, I don't have a problem saying that I don't believe that that's accurate. Like, I don't think that's a good thing to have in the Bible. I'm good with saying that.
Yeah. A lot of people think that when I say the Torah is homophobic, they're like, you can't say that. You can't argue with the Torah. And or like, you can't just like reinterpret the Torah and call it names. And I'm like, I'm not reinterpreting. It's literally homophobic unless you think that verse is saying queer love is a good thing. Like, I'm happy for you to reinterpret that verse that way, but it literally does not say that. Torah is homophobic. And if you think it's not, then you're the one who's reinterpreting it. Just because Torah is homophobic does not mean we should be. We need to be better than that.
I agree.
Saying that, like, Torah says some problematic things. Torah is misogynistic. Torah is ableist as fuck. Like, Torah is homophobic. That does not make it okay for us to be those things.
Right.
If you are those things, you are a problem.
Where we talk, I guess we're talking about Leviticus, but I do want to circle back to this question at some point. But let's pause and we'll come back to Leviticus, because I do want to honor this question, because so somebody was, when we were talking about the way in which Christians and Christianity try to reach backwards into like a Passover Seder and overly identify with that. And so their question is, does trying to relate to the Exodus story as a Christian change appropriateness for Black American Christians? And so one thing I want to clarify about what I said first is that I don't think most Christians understand that that's what they're doing. For the record, I don't think that Christians who participate in Christian Seders and Passovers are like, this is how I'm going to connect with the Jews who escaped Egypt. I think that in their head, they are like, they are, Christians, we like things to, as we've mentioned, we like things to be about us. And so we have this mentality like, well, the Bible says I've been adopted in. The Bible says I'm part of the team now. And so whatever's yours is now mine. We need to get over that. But so do you feel like that, that relationship, or at least that ability to identify with oppression and escaping oppression, do you feel like it is different for someone who is Black and identifies as a Christian versus someone who is white and identifies as a Christian?
Regardless of what color your skin is and what part of history that your story fits into, if you are not Jewish, you are not doing Seders. So that's the first thing. That said, there is a lot to be said about Black and Jewish overlap in stories because of the Egypt thing and because of the American thing, which needs to be very carefully talked about because it's very easy to erase Jews of color. There are Black Jews whose families experienced enslavement in the United States and also have ancestry as being a part of the Jewish people who were enslaved in Egypt. And both stories are theirs. I've heard of amazing partnership Seders that honor both stories of oppression and freedom within the Seder framework. But it needs to be led by Jews for Jews. And if it is done in a partnership way, then it is led by Jews in partnership with Black people who may or may not be Jewish, for Jews and Black people who may or may not also be the other. Like, but you can't have, like, being Black and not Jewish and relating to the Israelites' exodus from Egypt does not give someone claim over the Jewish ritual of Seder. There are other ways to relate to that. There's a lot of music that comes from the Black community about the Israelites escaping from Egypt, because that metaphor becomes extremely powerful for African Americans or Black people whose ancestors or who were themselves enslaved, then used to sing about their experience being enslaved and hopefully also being freed, or their ancestors' experience of that. That overlap is very powerful. It does not.
We're just all in awe of how you've answered this over here in these comments. We're all over here like, God damn, that was such a good answer.
Aw, thanks. Sometimes it's like, I feel like I say so many words because I'm trying to get to a very, like, very particular point, and I know that, like, there's a lot, like, intersectionality is really important, and, like, erasure is so easy, and, like, it's important to take all of it into, and all of that said, if I do misspeak, I do want to be called in. And if I say something and somebody's like, that doesn't feel right because, you know, that's not how it works in the Black community or whatever, like, I want to be called in on that because I do want to grow and be better.
Yeah. I think you answered that really beautifully. That was very honoring of both communities and of the boundaries that both communities hold and of the shared pain that both communities have experienced in different ways. I thought it was a very beautiful answer. And it affirms what I've learned and been told in the places where I have learned from rabbis, that relating to learned and been told in the places where I have learned from rabbis, that relating to something is very different than appropriating something.
Yeah. And somebody said in my comments, Christianity has plenty of meaningful practice on its own without needing to steal from Jews, which is true. Here's another vulnerable but also funny story. I accidentally had a first communion. When I was in, I don't know, 5th grade, 6th grade, I had a best friend who was Catholic. She would come to my house. She lived a few blocks away from me. She would often get off at my bus stop on Friday afternoons, and we'd have a sleepover, which meant that she got to experience Friday night Shabbat experience. And, you know, she really enjoyed the grape juice because we had, like, sparkling Welch's grape juice, and it was delicious. And she would just kind of like,
I thought you said she really enjoyed the great Jews, and then you're like, because, you know, we have the sparkling.
She did. She enjoyed that as well. We were pretty great, but she liked the Welch's sparkling grape juice, and would just kind of like sit there like this, waiting for us to finish all the gibberish in Hebrew until it was time to drink it, and like then we'd drag her along to services, and I'd, like, you know, help her follow along, and she'd be like, I don't understand any of this. I'm just gonna sit here awkwardly, and then, like, we'd go home and we'd like, you know, play dress up and have a great time and sleep over and then spend all day Saturday together, and then she'd go home. One day I said, you know, she keeps coming to synagogue with us. Can we have a double sleepover? And on Sunday morning, her mom can pick us up and I'll go to church with her. And my parents said, okay. My mom said, in preparation for me, if they stand, you can stand. If they sit, you can sit. If you like the music, feel free to sing along. If they're saying things like, you know, praising Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, hum instead of saying the words. That was all she gave me. So I go to this nice Catholic church.
Oh, no.
I was like, no. And she also said, but if they kneel, don't kneel. No kneeling occurred. But
we got to draw the line somewhere.
all of a sudden, everybody starts getting up and leaving the pews. And I'm like, it has not been an hour. Like, that was really fast. And then my friend goes, she says, come on, it tastes like matzah. And I'm like, what? I'm like 11 years old. I have no idea what's going on. My mom prepare me for this. And so I go and I get in the line. Her mom does not stop me. And I don't know if that's like, I didn't know her mom very well, but like she didn't, as far as I knew, she wasn't like a proselytizing kind of Catholic. She was fine with like her daughter being best friends with a Jewish girl. Like nothing, but like, I don't know, maybe she just didn't notice that I got up, or like she didn't think twice about it. But I get in line behind my friend and somebody hands me the wafer and goes, the body of Christ. And I'm thinking, that's fucking weird. And you know, I said in my head, I'm thinking that's weird. I didn't say fucking weird, but you get it.
I like it better that first way. I
might have spit it out because it definitely didn't taste like matzah.
No, it tastes like packing peanuts.
I don't remember if I spit it out or not, but then I saw everybody else in the wine line and like the old lady going, the blood of Christ. And then like with her thing, she's like not even getting all the lipstick off of the edge of the cup. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. That's disgusting. So I didn't do the blood of Christ, but I did eat his body, maybe spit it out. And
You're half in the club. I will send you a communion cup if you want.
But wait, that's not the end of the story. So I go home. My mom's like, how was church? My mom says, how was church? I was like, oh, you know, the music was really nice. They didn't kneel. And then we did this weird thing where like, they call it the body of Christ. And my mom goes, oh, you didn't. And I was like, what? She said, you weren't supposed to do that. I said, well, you didn't tell me about that. You told me not to kneel. You didn't tell me not to eat anything. She says, okay, well, whatever you do, don't tell the rabbi. That Friday, we go to the synagogue, services, you know, I enjoy services. And then afterwards, we have what we call oneg, which means enjoyment or pleasure. It's snack time.
We call it fellow.
Well, oneg, where the Bursteins brought their like M&M cookies, homemade, it was always the best. And so like we're all standing around schmoozing, and like I'm you know chatting with the rabbi, and he says, so I heard you went to church on Sunday, and I said, yeah, and I accidentally did communion. He says, oh no. He goes, okay, and did you feel anything? I was like, no. He said, did you feel any connection to Jesus through that? Or did it like, did you connect with it at all? And I was like, no, I thought it was weird. They called it the body of Christ.
Oh my gosh.
I thought that, you know, cannibalism. And he was like, then he said, then you're fine. And that was the end of the conversation.
Man, if somebody would have told me when I was 11, if you don't connect with it, it's fine. You don't have to go. I would have been like, I'm out? That's fantastic news.
He was just like, I mean, I have a feeling that if I'd said like, you know, I really felt a powerful connection to Jesus, then he probably would have guided me to like, you know, okay, well, it sounds like maybe there's a different religious path for you. I don't.
Wait, stop. Are you being serious?
I think I don't know for sure because it didn't actually happen like that. So I don't know if he would. That's what I would say. So maybe I'm projecting like what I would have wanted him to say.
Wild, like, because I feel like every pastor I know would be like, "We need to get you right with God." What do you mean you feel connected to something at a Jewish service?
The reason that I think he might have been like, you know, all right, so maybe Judaism's not for you, but like, you know, this was before my bat mitzvah, so like, which he always described as the bar mitzvah. The bat mitzvah is the parent's choice. Confirmation is the student's choice. A few years later, when I did confirmation, and he was like talking to us about it, and like he wanted us to all make a statement of confirmation, and he said, "Listen, there have been people who choose not to be confirmed, who are lifelong participants in Jewish community and live Jewish lives. You don't have to be confirmed in order to be Jewish. And there are people who have gone through confirmation and are now clergy people in other faiths. So this is a ceremony, but like it's not locking you in or out of Judaism. So like
Yeah.
I think that if I had said, and also the way he asked, like out of curiosity, like, did you have a connection with Jesus in that moment? Like, I think he would have been willing to help steer me where my soul was pointing me if that was where I wanted to go.
Wow.
I think rabbis, not all rabbis, but I think rabbis on the whole are more likely to do that in Christian clergy, but certainly not all rabbis. I think a lot of rabbis would find that very, very difficult to navigate. I can see myself being able to do that quite easily with a congregant. I have also given a lot of thought about what I would do if my future children said that to me. And that would be much harder. I would still do it. I would still say, all right, like, you know, you read the Quran and you feel a real connection to that. Let's find a Muslim community for you to get involved with and see if this is for you. I would do that for my child as much as any congregant. It would be very painful because I love Judaism so much, and I want it's like Zumba. I think everybody should love it. I understand it's not for everybody, but like I feel like it could be, like, but it's not. So, you know, if you want to do weightlifting and treadmill or, you know, whatever, like that's fine. There are other ways to achieve that, you know, spiritual or fitness high that you're looking for.
I'm sorry, I'm distracted because my the comments rolling through are just jokes about the body of Christ at this point. They're just like, man, the body of Christ stuck to the roof of your mouth is the worst.
I've heard plenty of Jesus jokes in my day, but the ones that are coming to mind are definitely for the midnight hour, which at the local comedy club is a show called Raunch.
You know dirty jokes about Jesus?
Well, he's hung like this and promises a second coming. Was that inappropriate? Did I cross the line? I think I broke you.
No, you know what? There's a really old movie about a Christian high school, and they put on a production of the crucifixion, obviously, because why not? And the youth pastor's son is Jesus, and one of them, she is Jewish. And she says, "No, that's what I call being hung on a cross."
Somebody,
I've heard the joke-ish, but when you said it, it was I'm probably gonna cut this part and post it as a
Wait, if I might also maybe cut my my accidental first communion and like truncate it a little bit and make that a post. Somebody, Boratanzo wants to know, Pastor, do you have any videos discussing the anti-Semitism commonly found in Christian practice? Do you personally have any videos that where you discuss that?
I do. I have a couple videos where I talk about it from a perspective. I in two different veins. So I have videos where I talk about it because of the trend in Christianity of using the term Pharisee as a synonym for like power hungry or greedy or corrupt. So like if someone and how that's an incredibly anti-Semitic way to use that term, but also it's not actually reflective of what's happening. How in the New Testament, where we see Christ interacting with the Pharisees, he's not taking a hard line against all Pharisees. He's actually engaging in Pharisaic practices of debating interpretations of the law. And so not only is it like super anti-Semitic, it's also an incorrect understanding of what's happening, which in and of itself is also anti-Semitic. And so I talk about, I have several videos that kind of go through that and talk about that. I also have a video talking about Barabbas. In the story of Christ's crucifixion, Barabbas is the character who is released instead of Christ, and they release Barabbas, and it's in the Gospels. It is when the Jews in the Gospels take what ends up being it's like the origin of Christianity treating the Jews as though they killed Christ. So I've made videos talking about how like Jesus was a political prisoner of Rome, and you can't blame anybody else for that. And that's like, there are so many ways to break that incident down, which for the record, I don't actually even believe that happened. I don't think that's a real story. I think that was included for many reasons. Not the least of which is that it creates a villain out of Judaism. And part of the tension of the New Testament that Christians have to grapple with and come to at least a honest reckoning with is that in the New Testament, and specifically as the first Christian church is beginning, the goal is to eradicate Judaism. You think you found a new way forward. And so their goal is, well, we need to convince everyone. And I don't want to say that like they were gunning for Judaism, but I think that it's very clear in the New Testament text that Paul and Peter are both attempting to convert people. And that does not stop. Christianity likes to act like it begins and ends with Gentiles. It doesn't. It is also aimed at the Jews. Christianity, early Christian churches were attempting to convert Jews as well. And so to paint the Jews as though they murdered our Savior is a really good way to try to pull people out of that faith structure and into this other faith structure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I also have videos talking about that and how that that kind of casual underpinning of anti-Semitism has never died out. It hasn't gone away. Christianity is the biggest antagonist of Judaism throughout the last couple thousand years. And so it's irresponsible and like intellectually dishonest to act as though that's not the case. And I do think that there is a respectful way to practice a Christian faith. And that involves acknowledging that we are a faith that is branched off of another faith and not in place of another faith. So that was a very long answer. So the short answer is yes.
Somebody else also, this is going back a little bit. Somebody wanted to know what was missionary dating.
Missionary dating. I'm dying to know what your comments are like because Emmy on the web keeps coming over. She's like, these comment sections are so different. Everybody who's in my comments, feel free to hop over to Rabbi Noyo because I definitely think that y'all should experience whatever's going on over there.
Well, Rev Jeff just said, I don't know if they just said this, but because I cannot keep up with these comments and TikTok comments do not load right. But they said, I just watched a video on whether eating God is kosher. I don't know if eating someone else's God. And then I can't find the other half of it. But wait, I think I saw that video.
That's
if
really funny.
God would count. Oh, because I was talking about eating the body of Jesus.
Yeah.
Don't tell the rabbi.
So,
just seeing my comments now.
I know. These comments, I am dying. Okay. So first of all, somebody said, would this make Christianity inherently anti-Semitic? I can answer from a Christian perspective, and Rabbi Noyo, if you'd like to answer from a Jewish perspective, absolutely, please do. From a Christian perspective, I think that it makes Christianity inherently lean towards anti-Semitism. The same way that any two things that exist and we're like, if one thing exists purely in competition of the other thing, then that's obviously going to always carry that weight. From a personal perspective, when we talk about the Great Commission in the New Testament, which is where Jesus tells the disciples to go into all the world and preach the gospel, what he says to them is, do what I've done for you. And I think that it is later on a Christian mindset that crept in over the years of trying to dominate religions. Because if you look at what Christ did for the rabbis, or for the disciples rather, what Christ did was create an open dialogue about some things, but also he just kind of regurgitated a lot of thoughts that were already being discussed by rabbis of the time. There's so much that Jesus says that Rabbi Hillel said way before Jesus was even around. And so I think that there's like a fundamental misunderstanding. And what it really boils down to is like the belief in Christ as Savior, and whether or not we believe in Christ as a Savior. If you don't believe that Jesus was the Savior of the world, there's a very nuanced conversation to be had about then what is the point of Christianity? Because without that distinction, then there's really not. And I say that as someone who doesn't necessarily believe in Christ as the Savior of the world or atonement theory or anything like that. I believe that Christ was a manifestation of God's existence here on this planet that is the best representation that we have of God's heart and God's values, and that we can follow the teachings of Christ to better align with God as Christians, the God that we understand. So that is my take. What is your take on the idea of whether or not Christianity is inherently anti-Semitic, with the full understanding you cannot and will not offend anyone over here?
I think it's not, well,
it's complicated.
I think the way it started was, I think in the same way that Judaism has evolved and is not what it you like the Judaism of Jesus' time, the Judaism at the time of the rabbis who are quoted in the Talmud were alive, which were like generations apart themselves. Like Judaism is different from how it used to be. I think Christianity as well is different from how it used to be. We also have many different denominations of Judaism, just like there are even more denominations of Christianity. Like, I mean, I don't know, like, the history of how the denominations of Christianity began, but it wasn't like Jesus died and all of a sudden you had Baptist and Episcopalian and Catholic and Lutheran.
Jesus
like,
died and upsprung a whole collection of Baptists.
I don't know exactly how they all came about, but like, obviously there's been evolution. I think that sorry, I was laughing so hard earlier. When I laugh, I get asthma attacks. I think that the way that Christianity has evolved enough that it does not have to be inherently anti-Semitic. As was pointed out earlier, Christianity has a lot of beautiful ritual and like spiritual elements to it that it does not need to steal from Judaism or anywhere else. People are creative. I mean, maybe this isn't the greatest example, but and Lev Shmu, who's one of my followers in my comments, we met because he was studying at a non-denominational seminary. He's Jewish, and I was studying at Hebrew College, and they were on the same hill. That was how we met. And together, we two Jews would go to Holden evening prayer, which I don't know if you know anything about Holden evening prayer, but it was beautiful. And another Jew would lead the singing, but that's because he was married to the oh my gosh, a priest of some kind. Don't remember which denomination.
It's starting to sound like a priest, a rabbi, and
I didn't even know that the person who was there were two people leading the music. The guitarist, who was definitely Christian, and the singer, who I did not know was Jewish, but I did know was married to the priest who was leading the service. Holden evening prayer was gorgeous. Like we did it like it was held every Tuesday, and I went a few times. Yeah, Salty Chaplain would go as well because they also went to the same school as Lev Shmu, which was where I was living. And I once said to Lev Shmu, I said, if I wasn't Jewish, I would do this. Like, hold an evening prayer felt like Jewish evening prayer.
Okay.
A lot of the songs had overlap with, well, Lev Shmu. Oh, you're talking about Zach. Zach wasn't Jewish then. Oh, but I didn't realize that Zach the singer, Salty Chapel, is saying that he wasn't Jewish when he was singing for Hold an Evening Prayer, but he is now. I didn't realize that he hadn't converted yet. But like, there's a lot of overlap in the English music of Hold an Evening Prayer with the Hebrew liturgy of Jewish evening prayer. Occasionally Jesus-y stuff would come up. I would kind of skip over that, or I'd change the lyrics and instead talk about source of life instead of, Lord Savior Jesus or whatever. But it was like, the music was beautiful, and we get to the communion, and I would be offered it. The way that it would work is it would be offered in a circle. You would receive it, and then you'd offer it to the person to your left. So like,
Okay.
I would receive it, but I wouldn't take of it. But then I would and you could pass it along with any words you like. And I used Jewish language because Lev Shmu was next to me and was also coming from a Jewish background. And I'd say, this is the fruit of the vine, which is the English translation of how you bless the wine. And this is bread from the earth, which is how you bless bread. And then he would also say, thank you, and then pass it to the next person, because I don't think he took it either.
That's so
but
funny.
Like, it was such a beautiful experience, and like, nothing about that felt anti-Semitic. It felt like the same, in the same way that like you might hear two different songs from two songwriters like generations apart writing about heartbreak in the same kind of mood, and like there's like a certain 2-chord progression, like this chord to that chord, that just like elicits some kind of feeling, and you're like, wow, they did that and they did that. It's not like one was plagiarizing the other, but somehow the emotion evoked by this chord to that chord came to that person and came to this other person to make the same come across. And I feel like that was how I experienced Hold an Evening Prayer, that somebody wrote words about day turning into evening that
I love that.
just like the words that my ancestors, the ancient dead rabbis, wrote about how our day turns into evening. And like, it felt like they were different words of the same prayer.
Yeah.
And so I think that there is absolutely room for Christianity to not be inherently anti-Semitic, because we're in 2021, we'll be in 2022 within a few days. Like, we are creative human beings, and religion can be so many things, and you just don't need to take from anybody to make it
right.
Beautiful, amazing. And honestly, that's one of the reasons I love that we believe the Messiah has not come yet, because if the Messiah had come, everybody would be worshiping exactly the same, and we wouldn't have all these different, varied, beautiful faith practices.
This dovetails into like part of why we even talked about doing this live, because as you know, there was a big kerfluffle on the ticker talkers about Leviticus recently. And when it first went down, I messaged you, because we're Facebook friends. I messaged you and was like, hey, do you have space for me to like process something with you? And you very graciously said yes. Because my understanding of so much of the texts that we Christians would call the Old Testament has shifted so dramatically in the last several years, as I've started to come to an understanding of what is the most honoring of Jews way to practice my Christianity, which is a question that I had posed to me by a rabbi that I love very dearly, when I was asking him, like, how do you be a good friend of Jews and also a good Christian? He was like, well, how do you practice your Christianity in the most honoring way of Jews? And I was like, I have never asked myself that before. And so now whenever I'm involved in conversations that are centered in what I would call Old Testament texts or Hebrew scriptures, and there's not a Jewish voice present, I get very like, this guys, we cannot we cannot take something from one marginalized people group. So for clarity, I'm queer. And as a queer person, there's so much conversation around the verses, the clobber verses in the scripture and what that looks like. And I have definitely been someone in my history, who has said things like, well, Leviticus doesn't matter because we're not under Levitical law anymore. And a very kind friend of mine years ago was like, as a Jew, what you say when you say that is, it's offensive. And like, I'm thankful that they didn't sugarcoat it. And they said it's offensive because for me, it is not a dead thing. It is a living, relevant thing. And what you're saying is that what I consider relevant and beautiful and important, you consider not even worth discussing. And I was like, oh God, oh, you're super right that I'm definitely and I didn't mean to. And so now whenever I engage those conversations, it's very important to me that we have Jewish voices in those conversations, because as a queer person, I'm not interested in creating safety and spiritual peace for my queer community at the expense of a different marginalized group. And I feel like that's often what happens when Christianity or ex-Christians talk about Hebrew scriptures and their relation to homosexuality.
Yeah.
And so I messaged you and was like, would you be willing to talk about this with me on a live? Because I benefited from Jews in my life who were willing to be like, I'm going to talk about this with you because I trust that you want to learn. And so I'm so thankful that you're willing to have this conversation with me in general and have it on a live. So let's talk about Leviticus. Oh, wait, pause. Someone asked you about missionary dating.
What?
Someone asked you about missionary dating, right?
Yes. Well, asked you.
Yes. So missionary dating is a
gift.
Oh, so missionary dating is the practice of a Christian, that's my context, dating outside of Christianity in hopes of convincing that person to join the religion to make the dating passable. Since we're not supposed to date non-Christians,
yeah,
I'll date you, but part of dating you is going to be to get you to come to church with me, because then I can get you saved. Oh, it's so gross.
Yeah, I kind of figured that was what it was all about. Thank you, Michael, for the gift.
And in fairness to the church, most churches discourage missionary dating.
Yeah, there are people who convert to Judaism in order to marry a Jewish partner. I discourage that because I think it should be for the individual converting and not for somebody else.
Yeah.
I wanted to clarify. Rev Jeff wanted me to clarify: does the Messiah call Gentiles to worship God Jewishly, or did I misunderstand what you were saying? So it's not that the Messiah is calling for all the peoples of the earth to worship in the Jewish way, but rather, when the Messiah comes, at that time, all the peoples of the world will know that God is one and that God's name is one, and will all be worshiping in the same way, which will be in the Jewish way. It's not a requirement. It's sort of like, when the world is ready for the Messiah, that's when the Messiah will come. And that's one of the ways that we'll know, is like everybody is in agreement about God. As opposed to the Messiah shows up and is like, all right, here's how we're doing things. It's not really like that.
Everybody fall in line.
In fact, Jewish tradition teaches us that when the Messiah comes, if you are in the middle of planting a tree, you do not drop your tree to go greet the Messiah. You finish planting your tree, the Messiah can wait.
I love that.
We should probably wrap up because it's now past 11. We've been on for 2 hours, which has been so much fun, but I would love to do this again.
Do you have like 5 minutes to tell us your thoughts on Leviticus? Okay.
Yes. This will be like our
swan song
for everybody. As a treat, you can have some Leviticus. So yeah, Leviticus, the homophobic verse that people like to talk about and like to throw at us to be like, oh, you think you can be Jewish and queer? Well, what about Leviticus 18:22? It's like I said before, Torah's homophobic, and I'm okay saying that. Somebody else, I think it was Dr. Huju in the comments, said like, we have precedent. Yay! We have precedent for arguing with God. Moses argued with God when God was like, God literally was, after seeing how it relates to the behaving in the desert, was like, let me at him. And Moses was like, like with the hook. I don't know, get back here, guys. You're not doing that because it's a bad look. And if you kill them, you have to kill me too. So like, you can't start over with me because I'm tossing my lot with them. With Sodom and Gomorrah, God was like, I'm going to destroy all of them. And Abraham was like, hold on, that's a bad idea. How about we negotiate a little bit? So then you've gotten the Talmud, which was what Dr. Huju was mentioning, was you've got probably what you were mentioning was the oven of Achnai story, in which you've got a bunch of rabbis arguing. I don't need to get into the details of what they were arguing about, but two of them say the thing is not, I'm just going to say not kosher. It's not about food, but whatever. And one of them says it's kosher. Two of them say, well, no, you're wrong. And the other guy says, well, if the Jewish law agrees with me, then that water will flow backwards. Lo and behold, the water started flowing upstream. What does water know about Jewish law? And then he says, well, if the law agrees with me, let that tree move 400 feet to the left. And the tree gets up, moves over, and replants itself. And they're like, trees don't know anything about halakha. And he says, well, if the halakha agrees with me, then let a voice come down from heaven and say so. And then a voice comes from heaven, goes, he's right. And then the other ones go, so it's still 3 against 2. I forgot the part about where the walls actually like start to cave in on them, and then one of them jumps up and says, you don't know anything about what we're talking about, you stay out of this, walls. And the walls
God,
like stop in their tracks. Then the voice from heaven comes out, and then the 3 rabbis who say that it's, I think I said it was 2, but it was 3 rabbis say it's not kosher, and the one, even with God on his side, it's still 3 against 2. And then God laughs and is like, ha ha, my children have bested me. That's not the end of the story. The one who is in dissent ended up getting excommunicated. It's a very sad ending. Like, that's where the joke ends anyway. But like, yes, we have precedent to argue with God. We have precedent to argue over what Torah means. And even when God comes down and says, like, actually, you've got it wrong, like, shut up. Torah's in our hands now. Like, we get to do what we want with it. And Orthodox Jews sometimes get all prickly when you bring this up, because it doesn't, and logic is hard sometimes when you have big feelings. And so like, yeah, I'm okay saying like Torah's homophobic and Torah's wrong. There's also a point where Torah requires us to be happy. As somebody who experiences depression, I have a problem with that verse too. Like, you can't just command me to be happy. If I'm not happy, then I'm not happy, and there's nothing you can do about it. Like, sometimes Torah is just wrong. That said, there has been some amazing work on the reinterpretation of verses such as Leviticus 18:22. People reading this verse in new and beautiful ways, reading it through a queer lens, in order to bring a different kind of reading and a different kind of meaning to it and from it. So, Wylove, I think Wylove is an Orthodox Black Jew. He's Hasidic. He's like got a lot of great content about being an Orthodox Jew. He's an Orthodox Jew who doesn't practice, and he's pretty open about that, but like ideologically he still agrees with like how Orthodoxy, but he's progressive Orthodox, how Orthodoxy looks at Torah. And he's gay. And so when he's asked about this problematic homophobic Leviticus bit, he says, you can look at it literally, and literally it doesn't say anything. Literally it says you can't lie down with a man the way that you would lie down with a woman. And like, it doesn't say anything about penetration. It doesn't say anything about like whether they love each other. And besides, you don't know what actual human beings are doing behind their closed doors. So like, even if it did say things like that, you don't know what gay people are doing because it's none of your
Right.
business.
Not
So
necessarily
you have
prohibitive
no
of
judgment.
queer love.
Right. And so like, gay people can love each other, and if you don't know that they're having sex or not, then like you can't pass judgment on that. Which like for him works. For me, that still feels problematic because it's still putting like a label of sin on the act of gay sex, which I think for me, not good enough. But there are definitely people who read it as like, you wouldn't lie with a woman the way you lie with a man if you're gay, because if you lie with a woman and you're gay, you're not going to want to have sex with her. So like, it's basically encouraging you to be your gay self. Like, which is a beautiful read. I don't think that's what the people who, and I do, this is an entirely different conversation for another day, but I do believe it was people who wrote it, perhaps divinely inspired, but I do believe there were multiple authors. And I think that the people who wrote the text of the Torah at the time and in the society that they were writing it in didn't like queer love the way that we understand it today. It certainly happened. It was definitely more of a power kind of thing than a love kind of thing. But so like, no, I don't think they were saying that gay men shouldn't lie with men the way they lie with women because they're not going to love the women the way they love men. But I think that's a wonderful read, and I think it's valuable, and I think that it should not be dismissed just because it's not the literal meaning. And just in short, that is really important to Jewish interpretation because we have an interpretive approach to text called pardes. Pardes meaning paradise, which is kind of nice because it has the same letter flow.
Yeah.
The first word being pshat, which is simple or literal meaning. Then remez, which is what is it hinting towards. Then drash, which is what is the metaphor or analogy. And then sod, which is the secret or mystical meaning behind it. So like, yeah, pshat, it means don't have gay sex.
Right.
But I would say maybe one of the other levels of that interpretive approach is that actually it's saying to be your you know, your queer self in all of your glory, which I think is a beautiful way to read the text.
Yeah. I appreciate your input so much. I one of the things that I've struggled with this verse specifically in Christian progressive spaces is that the same people who want me to believe that it's not prohibitive of gay sex because there's no there's no framework for monogamous homosexuality or committed homosexuality also want me to believe that David and Jonathan were a couple secretly. And I'm like, that's intellectually dishonest to say that in Leviticus there's no framework, but by First Chronicles there is, and we're sure it's happening.
David was definitely pan.
Oh yes.
And Jonathan
bisexual. That man,
but had a hard time expressing his feelings, which is why Jonathan loved David, but David had a hard time saying I love you back. Also, Ruth and Naomi.
And I whenever we talk about like the potential to read queer love into specifically Hebrew scripture, I'm always like, yes, but we can't do that and also say that there was no framework for these things, and so Leviticus doesn't matter. You can't have both. Right. It doesn't work that way. And so I appreciate everything you've said because it creates this beautiful, abundant ability to view scripture vibrantly. It doesn't have to be just this one specific meaning off the top and that's all you get.
Right. There are different levels. I actually have an amazing source sheet that I have studied with a queer student of mine, backing up, I'll say there's, if you're not familiar with Svara, Svara, Queer Talmud Camp, and you're interested in learning Talmud and you are or are not queer and want to learn from a queer approach, Svara is amazing. It's been on my bucket list since before I knew I was queer. It is It is the brainchild of Rabbi B'nai Lappi, who she has said a lot of brilliant things. And one of the things that she said is, if you were a goat reading Torah, you would notice all of the stories about goats. And the same goes for being queer. If you're queer reading Torah, you're going to notice all the queer people in the Torah. And that said, I have this amazing source sheet that basically starts with God read through a queer lens and gives us a lineage coming down from the story of creation of all of our like heavy hitting characters as queer. Maybe we could learn that together sometime on live, because it is absolutely. It was put together by Binya Coates. I'm not sure if I'm saying Binya's last name correctly, and I also don't know their pronouns, but because I don't know them personally, although I see them pop up on Facebook every now and then as somebody I might know, because we have a lot of mutual friends. But like this source sheet is absolutely incredible. And after learning it with this one student, she was like, you have to do this with the entire queer learning cohort.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I know that we're winding down. I wanted to share with you. I wish I could find it again. But I've searched I've on TikTok, if you don't like or save a video, it gets really hard to find it again.
Yeah.
I found there was a video that I saw of a Jewish person. I don't know if they were a rabbi or if they were just very educated or if they were just talking. But they were talking about this verse in particular. And one of the things, and I don't remember the term, but they were talking about the Jewish law that sort of supersedes almost any law about if a life is at stake, and how
somebody actually was talking about that in the comments somewhere, but I can't remember where or why.
Well, they were talking about it in terms of queerness, and like that for so many queer people, to deny your queerness becomes a life or death situation. Yes. And so if we go by the letter of the law that says that when it becomes a life or death situation, that supersedes an existing law, that if you want to make Leviticus literal, there is still this very authentic, legitimate way to say we can still allow it to be not what we follow, because it was it Rabbi Hannah? Okay. Thank you. Because I was like, this is so good. Where did it go?
Yeah. That's also another amazing way to like read through Jewish text in a way that that queers the text.
Yes. And I love that. I love that law in general anyway. That's one that when I've done studying into, like, that is such a beautiful, the value of life that it places not just on physical life, but like, I just loved it. Anyway, I was like, what a beautiful way to interpret those verses and to apply law to law. I thought it was beautiful.
Thanks, Rabbi Hannah.
Yeah. Rabbi Noyo, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate you so much, and for all of the emotional labor you've put into tonight and educating us. And thank you so much for allowing us to grow.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Yes. And I would love to do it again. And I'd love to like go through that text study with you.
That would be amazing.
Be really happy to explain every little detail along the way.
I love it. I would love it. I would be phenomenal.
And we can, of course, continue all of these conversations as well, because they can just keep going.
Oh, for sure. I know we've been on for almost 2.5 hours, and you're right. We definitely I'm like, I have to go to bed, but it would be so easy.
And a very impatient partner waiting for me.
Yes, I'm so sorry. All right. Thank you so much. I will see all of you guys.
Waiting patiently.
All right. Bye.
Bye.